Hello class, happy week 3 to everybody. This week we are tasked with talking about cultural intelligence, and for this discussion post we are tasked to watch a couple of videos and respond to differences that we determined between the American culture and Chinese culture based on what the videos convey. Um, at first glance with the videos, the first indication that I have is that it was a fairly elementary viewpoint of Chinese culture. They discussed anything from the manner in which you greet one another to trying to determine a nonverbal communication regarding on where one stands within the conversation. Just looking at a yes/no perspective of the Chinese participant, for example, on the other end of the business exchange. However, I thought that was fairly elementary, and I actually kind of tried to relate that scenario back to perhaps a scenario that most of us find each other or find ourselves in our own job aspects. For example, if you're a rocket scientist, the manner in which you would have jargon and the manner in which you would talk, the speed at which you would talk, would be indicative of you talking with somebody else that is in the rocket science business, and wouldn't probably be the same way that you would talk to somebody if you're talking to an elementary school teacher, for example. In the same light, I would think that if you're invested into a cultural business exchange between an American and the Chinese, sure, according to the video, there are tools and expectations that you can have on the American side of it to say, hey, I need to adapt to the Chinese culture. However, what is not necessarily considered in any of these videos is the fact that the Chinese person is also exchanging with a Westerner, and there might be some type of gray area or at least meet in the middle type situations to look at. So what I did was I found a scholarly reference that talked about the Chinese, how Chinese feel about the concept of face. Many of the business many of the scholarly models will point to face as being some type of black and white situation within the Chinese culture, that face is incredibly important, and that the Westerner, when they come and actually do the exchanges, that they should pay particular attention to this concept. But in reality, what I found was that, and actually what I expected to find, is that it's not such a black and white idea, and as complicated as the Chinese language is itself, there are varying levels of the concept of face, and it all really boils down to the cultural background of the Chinese person, and even the language that they use to describe it. And there was a couple of things that the author pointed out. The author pointed out that there's ETIC researchers, that would be researchers that research this face phenomenon based on a Western approach, and there's emic researchers that research face, or the concept of face, in the Chinese perspective. And what it boiled down to, it boiled down to a couple of independent researchers, and they both determined that there's four specific generic, I shouldn't say specific, there are four generic explanations of face. One of them is, and it's not really all that different from what we see in our own culture as well. The first being a giving face, that would be anything to enhance or elevate or affirm one's face within a social group. The other one is a protecting face, that would be to ensure that face is not lost within the social group. A vying for face would seek to increase oneself within the social group or increase the group itself within a larger group, and not considering face would be the final and fourth one that talks about not really caring about face at all. So obviously there are tremendous differences between American and Chinese culture, but to specifically spell out what exactly those are, that's obviously fairly complicated. Another complicated real life example that I have of a foreign culture happens to be within my own job. Like I had mentioned in many other or several other classes, and I think I've mentioned it in this class as well. I work as a telecommunications engineer, and much of the work that I deal with, I have a whole group of people, engineers that do some of the other work for me out of Bangalore, India. And when I talked to them, at first it was actually really difficult. Not only did I have the dialect and just the difference of cultures to deal with, and not really understanding what they were saying. But there are other more implicit cultural differences that I wasn't really expecting. One of which was none of the people from India that I have come across have much of a sense of humor at all. They're pretty much all business. And one thing that I definitely didn't anticipate was that they are highly receptive to time, and that goes especially when it comes to the end of the workday. I didn't really understand that so much at the beginning, but as I have gone on with my career here, I have understood why that is. Part of understanding why that is just practicing and talking with other engineers that deal with the India group. One other major, just almost an eye-opening eye-opening platform for me to understand the India culture is of Facebook. Um, with having such an extreme population in India, which we don't really understand here in the United States, and just seeing some videos of mass transportation, for example, coming out of Bangalore at the end of the day, it is actually fairly insane how many people are shipped in and out of Bangalore, India just to get home. Just watching some of the light rail type situations that they have in Bangalore and just seeing people fighting to get on that light rail just so they can get home was an eye-opening experience for me, and helped me understand why they're so time receptive, at least in the India team that we have in my company. The other thing is just having the Facebook exchanges, the liking, even if you don't truly understand what they're saying or talking or even typing in a language that doesn't make any sense to you, you still get a feeling and you get to understand what's important to them, whether that be money, whether that be status, whether that be if a nice car or a nice motorcycle. For example, there's some of them that are really high, and that makes for some interesting icebreakers when you're actually communicating with the team. You get to talk about, oh, hey, I saw on Facebook that it's your third wedding anniversary, or you met this girl or something like that. That's something that is able to break through to the culture, and you're meeting at that point you're meeting them on their level without actually having to do a whole lot of studying. You're just watching. Facebook and other social media makes that very easy. Even though I don't like it, it actually is kind of cool if I'm dealing with another culture. It allows me to understand where they come from. Another, the final thing that one would think that this was an issue, but it actually is. If I'm emailing somebody from India and they have the name of Sunil or Dathan, I can't determine the gender of that person. So if I'm trying to be respectful, like I always try and be respectful in any correspondence that I have, whether it's internally with with our own team or if it's externally to a customer, I usually, and my mom always taught me to address people with a sir or a ma'am. And I found that to be incredibly difficult if I can't determine it from the name. It seems fairly easy on a Westerner side of it because you have standard names for boys and girls. But when you're dealing with a whole India team and you can't determine it, I've guessed at times and I've been wrong, and that's super embarrassing. So having a platform like Facebook really helps to determine that. So, anyways, wish everyone the best of luck the rest of the week, and we will talk with you next week.